I'm speaking with Mr. John Lewis, who was born in Carroll County, Maryland, has lived in Carroll County, Maryland his whole life, and is making these comments to be heard at the Maryland Lynching Truth and Reconciliation Commission hearing on February 1st, 2025 in Carroll County. Now, John, when you were growing up, did your family ever talk about lynching?
Yeah, they did. About pretty much everywhere you went throughout my community, people talked about or knew of someone who had been lynched.
What were those conversations like that you heard?
Well, they were like people somebody who lived in Baltimore, someone who lived in Catonsville, someone who lived in Frederick was lynched because of this, that, or the other. Then there was the story, don't know how true it was, of my father's brother, who was beat to death and lynched down in Sykesville under that bridge down there that goes across from Carroll into Howard County. And there's a bar over in Howard County. Black folks weren't allowed in this bar, but they could go over to the bar and stand on the outside. And somebody had dumped loads and loads of sand along the little creek that came down behind the bar. And they referred to it, the African American folks referred to it as the beach. Whereas they couldn't go in the bar, but they had made especially a little stoop out back of the bar and a little window. And I used to often wonder, why would I go in there and buy anything when you treat me like I'm a piece of dirt or something? And then I noticed sometimes I would just stop across the road and watch. I used to do crazy things like that. I don't know, I guess I'm crazy. Because not too far down the road from there, and I'm not changing the subject, there was a creek that when you came down Forsyth Road, there was a creek that came down and it ran into a culvert on the Forsyth Road. When the shadow of your headlights hit at night, you rounded this curve and then your car dropped down like that and swung around to the left. The shadow of your headlights hit that water coming down that little creek. And the story was that after dark, if you went across Forsyth Road, coming back into Sykesville, you would see this ghost. And I was going with this young lady that lived in Sykesville, where her sister lived over in Cooksville. And I was coming, she was over there, and I was coming from that house one night. And I thought, they talk about this ghost down here. And just, let me see what happens. So I come on down the road, rounded the curve, went into the turn. Sure enough, looked exactly like a man with a hat on, with his head bent, walking across the road.
Wow.
I'm not going to tell you what I said. We're on the air. And I thought, oh, I can't turn around. I got to keep going. So it wasn't nothing for me to do. And I had a 1954 Ford, brand new. They tell me these fools will run. Well, I'm gonna find out tonight. And I stepped down on them and shot across there. And then after I got across, I thought, that's not real. And like an idiot, I turned around and went back. And came back down again. But then I figured out what it was. That's when I figured it was that shadow from my headlights reflecting on that water and then the leaves and things along there that made it look exactly like a human being.
Wow.
You know, and I told him, I said, there's no man walking across that road down there. Of course, they told me I was crazy, but I was often told I was crazy. Anyhow, it was down behind this bar where they put all this sand out there. And these guys, black guys, came down there and they went up to the little window in the back and they ordered their little drink, which they paid twice as much for. I found out later, as a white guy sitting in the bar did. And then they'd go down there on the beach and had a little stool, or they sit in the sand and they drank until they got drunk. And then guess what? If you sat there until you got drunk, you were there the next month because they didn't come out to get you. They left you there.
Well,
And,
did you ever hear the name Townsend Cook
Nope.
associated? Never.
Never heard of him.
See,
He was not one of the people mentioned in the stories about Lynch.
well, what was it like? I mean, you were born here in Carroll County. What was it like to grow up as a child of color in Carroll County?
Well, it was living in Johnsville wasn't bad. Now that you get old, when you get older and look back on it, it was a close-knit community of Black people. Now, that's not to say that we had everything that the white folks had. An example is when it snowed. Just so happens that I worked on my cousin's farm because I had to plow the dirt road open. I'd walk back over there in the snow if it was waist deep, get the tractor and the drag sled out, and that's what we used to open the road up for people who lived along that road. So it would be 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'm out there with that John Deere putt-putting, which most people said they were glad to hear it coming because they knew the road was getting open. Because the state road would not allow the plow to come down our road. Johnsville Road itself, which is now Bartholomew Road, was a hard road, macadam, and they weren't allowed to come down there until all other roads were finished. So overall, living in the community wasn't bad, as long as, how did Hudson put it that time? As long as you stay in your place. But see, staying in your place was a term that one had to reckon with. What does it mean? Where's my place? This too got me into trouble because I started to wondering at a young age, what's my place? So I went home one day and I said to my mother, I was riding a bicycle. And I asked her, I said, what's our place? She said, what are you talking about, boy? And I said, well, I just heard that, we black people had a place and we had to stay in their place. And she said, yeah, that's exactly what you do. I said, well, what am I supposed to do? You're supposed to stay in your, well, that's my question. Where is my place? And she said, black people, when they tell you you aren't allowed to do this and you aren't allowed to do that. And she said, do you remember Lester Cook? Yeah, I remember Lester. Lester was a distant cousin of her, and Lester died with glomerulonephritis. These are the disease of the kidney. Snow was that deep in the fields and in the road. And the county, the state, wouldn't plow that road over so they could get back to the Johnsville church to bury him. So they got together, all the men and all the boys, and developed a crew. And we started about 4 o'clock in the morning at Lester's house, shoveling by hand. And we shoveled all the way into the church. I guess the church was probably about, maybe 3/4 of a mile at that. We shoveled all the way to the church. We shoveled out around the church. We shoveled out down around the cemetery to the gravesite. And Mr. Ollie Dorsey, God rest his soul, he had to shovel all that snow off because he used to dig the graves. And with that ground as hard as a rock, but with a shovel and a pick, he dug the grave. But they never came out that road. We shoveled it. And she said, that's what I mean by you staying in your place. As black people, we're only going to get so much of this and that. That's when she brought up the story about my father's uncle, as I alluded to earlier. He was beat to death under that bridge in Sykesville at the place they called the beach. Yeah. They said was because he had sex with the white woman. And there was a couple of white women who used to hang down there with these men. Somebody beat one of them to death. And then she said he was beat to death and then hung, or vice versa, I don't remember which. But come to find out, he didn't do he hadn't bothered that woman. Those white guys beat that woman and then hung.
Well, I mean, you've been talking about your mother telling you to stay in your place, but I know you didn't do that all the time because I know you were involved in trying to make changes in Carroll County during the civil rights movement. Can you just talk for a couple minutes about that?
Yeah, with me, it's a wide subject, so I don't know what you want me to include in this, but they said if you want to start a story, you start at the beginning. And I don't want to spend all afternoon or all day or what time we have on the beginning, but my inquisitiveness, I used a big word, used to get me into a lot of trouble. Then I used to have to figure out, God, how am I going to get out of this? So basically, to shorten the story, the first I learned how to drive. My father bought an old 1938 Oldsmobile, rusted. So some of us in the guys, we wanted to go to Reynoldstown, I think it was, to a dance. And the only way we had to go was in that old rusty Oldsmobile. So I told the guys, I said, I can use the Oldsmobile and I'll take you guys with me. But, and they said, uh-oh, he's got another scheme. I said, no, it's not a scheme. You want to go to the dance? Yeah, yeah. I go, how you going? You don't have no car. So yes, I do. You don't have a car, but I do. We going in that thing? Said, yeah, we going in that thing. Now, if you want to go, you ride in that thing. If you don't want to go, then don't get in that thing. Well, we guys said, hey, when I had old man Forsyth store, and old man Forsyth store sold you everything from a teaspoon to a dinosaur's tail. He sold it, including paint. Went and got 2 gallons of maroon paint and some of them big wide brushes. I told him, all right, y'all want to ride? Yeah, well, come on, get a brush. What are we going to do? I said, we're going to paint this car. Paint it with a brush? I said, yeah, with a brush. Man, he said, man, you crazy. I said, okay. I'm going to Reynoldstown. You ought to stay home. Well, if that's the way we got, they jumped in the fastest paint job I ever seen. And that thing looked awful. But we got in her and she jumped. She had, you're probably familiar with this, Charles. Jump timing. Mm-hmm. Timing meant when your engine was misfiring. And what would happen when your engine misfired, you'd turn the key off and the car would sit there and go, like it's going to stop. Then we go, yeah. So my father showed me how he said you keep a fingernail file or a wooden pack of matches. Matches come in a little wooden box there. He said, and a nail file. He said, when she does that, take your distributor cap off. He said, and gap your points and then follow. He said, and space them the thickness of that little wooden cigarette pack or one piece of it. We got that part fixed too. Well, we were ready. Well, we rolled in down there in Reynoldstown and they got to laughing at us. But I told them, look, they can laugh all they want to. Them fools that been laughing at you, ask them how'd they get here. They walked. Go on. I said, ask any one of them how they got here. They walked. You rode here. So why you worried about them laughing? And when you leave here, you'll be riding. They'll be walking. But anyway, I used to do things like that. But then when I took that old car and I'd be riding someplace and I'd ride there and I'd come on a restaurant. Now, old man Den Lines, and I probably shouldn't say this in the open because I don't know who he's got a living at a restaurant there in Eldersburg. And that was the nastiest one-legged man. Oh, he was nasty. Saying it, and God knows being black, as soon as you walked in the store, he started yelling and screaming. Hey, you kids, get what you want, get out of here. And we look at him and said, well, wait a minute. We haven't decided what we want yet. We're deciding, get out of here. Okay, and I have a brother. Okay, he's a church boy, and he's deceased now, so I can say it. That was the stillest person I ever knew. We, we, the rest of us wouldn't take nothing, but we'd come out of that store and get out the road about a quarter of a mile from the store. And everybody would pull out and see what loot that's stolen. And he was loaded. And nobody. I said, Ron, where you get that stuff from? He and he used to study. Oh, one little bastard ain't messing with me. and
So
and every
if you moved from sort of that period of your life into doing some work for civil rights.
well, see, that's where I was. I used to see just out of inquisitiveness, that's where civil rights really started. But when it started, I didn't know it was civil rights. But when it started, and I knew that it was said, you can't go in this restaurant. You can't go in that restaurant. You can't go in the Rexall's down in Sykesville. You can't go in the Carroll movie theater in Westminster and that kind of stuff. So when I got the opportunity to pass one of these places, I just get the notion, what the hell with it? I'm going in and sit down. And I knew them people weren't going to serve me. And I kind of figured I was going to get locked up. So I went in and I sat down. And they come over. What can we help you with? I have a cup of coffee, please. And they get the cup of coffee and bring it over in the cardboard cup and sit it down there with the top on it. Oh, I knew what this meant. But I go, no, I don't want it in a cardboard cup. Why you give it to me in a cardboard cup? And the waitress or the way, all nervous. Well, you asked for a cup of coffee? I said, yeah, but I'm gonna drink it here. And they start stuttering and carrying on. I go, oh, I got you now. And then they finally go, we can't serve you there. Why? We just can't serve you here. I said, why? I just want a cup of coffee. Now, by this time, and my crazy tracker record was terrible because I picked a lot of times when I did these tricks, I picked the time when the place was crowded. And then I look around and go, oh shit, look at all these people in here. And they looking at me. And I thought, and I said, well, why can't I have a cup of coffee? Because we can't serve you in here, mister. You're not allowed in here. Well, and then, all right, if I'm gonna get locked up, the hell with it, I'm gonna get locked up. And then I go, well, what do you mean you can't serve me in here? I get loud, see, and they didn't want me to get loud. Now, it's against the law. You can't be, we'll have to call the cop. Well, call the cop. I thought to myself, oh God, I hope they don't call the cops. I hear the cops just as bad as these people are. Anyway, they call the cops. But most of the time, I would venture to guess to say 90% of the time, the cops would come and they'd say, come on. And I said, where am I going? Don't talk to you, man. And I said, what, with your gun? No, yeah, you're right. I know how you talk with that gun, and I don't have a gun. I said, okay, I'm coming. I told that, I turn around and go, see, he wants to talk to me. Y'all watch out the window. See what he does. Anyway, I to my side, he said, I'm not gonna bother you, but do me a favor. And I said, what's that? He said, look, they don't want you in the restaurant because they don't want to serve black people. He said, do me a favor so I don't have to lock you up. Then you don't have to pay a big fine. Because he said it is against Maryland law. Only white only can eat there. I said, why would anybody make a damn law like that? I said, that doesn't make sense. If you're in business to serve people, you're in business to serve people. I didn't want him to give it to me. I'm going to pay for it. But he said, look, the law is the law. And if you want to change the law, you got to go to Congress. I said, okay. He said, but just do me a favor. You didn't call me. I said, okay. Since you were nice about it, I'll do that for you. And I did. I left. But then I'd get to another one later on, somewhere down the road, and I'd go and do the same thing all over. Just to see how many times that they would throw me out. And they did. And each time it just buried itself in my soul that things weren't right. Things shouldn't be this way. You know, and I remembered back again to when Lester Cook died. They couldn't take Lester to the funeral home because he was black. Black people had to keep the black people had what we as kids called a death room. Every house, and I remembered when my grandfather Tom died. My my grandmother had a living room that was immaculate. Flowers and pictures and things sitting there, but you couldn't go in there. And I said to my father one day, I think we can't go in Granny's living room. He said, that's the death room. Go, what? The death room. What is a death room? If you're black, you can't go in the funeral home. They had to put you in your living room at your home. Sure enough, when he died, and I thought to myself, well, I'll be damned. Pap was right. They laid him out in the living room.
Mhm.
And I thought it was the weirdest thing.
I have one more question for you. What would reconciliation look like? You've told a long story of things that were unjust and unfair. How do we deal with that now? How do we move forward?
I'm a firm believer. I'm a firm believer in what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong. I'm a firm believer in the simple fact that there's, as I started in this conversation, there's something mysterious somewhere, be it God, be it man, I don't know, but I believe in God. And I'm sort of like a lot of the old folks when they say, you got to let go and let God. You got to let somebody more powerful than us handle this thing. Because you see, we don't know how to handle stuff. All we want to do, and this includes mainly Congress, all we want to do is find fault with one another and fight. That's all we want to do. But then we turn around and we look at our kids who are growing up under us, and we tell them that you shouldn't fuss, you shouldn't fight. And the kids are looking at us like, just like I did when I was a kid. You must think I'm a damn fool. And all you do is fight. All you do is fuss. But you're telling me I can't fight. And yeah, the Bible says turn the other cheek. And wait a minute now, hold it. Bible said turn the other cheek. I got two cheeks. And when you slap me on one, you got to deal with me, brother, on the other one. And you got to get past the first one to get to the other one. But these are the things you tell me. And we're starting with the halls of Congress. And we're coming on down the line to people. Because could we put these people in office to settle communal problems? We put these people in office to show us how to be peaceful, how to love one another, how to solve our problems, how to solve our differences. But instead, what do we get out of Congress? And nowadays, it's worse than it ever was. My God, that's all they do is fight. I don't understand how we're supposed to solve something when all we're going to do is fight. It won't work, people. We're going to get rid of all them people coming across the line from another country. They get in this country to live a better life. And then they get here and they're going to be sent back to where they came from, which is an indication that it's no better here than where they came from. We've got to live together. We've got to learn how to hold hands. And we've got to learn how to use our hearts instead of our crazy minds that lead us to nothing but battle. And it's not just America, it seems to be all over this world. So if man doesn't seem to be able to solve it, his record is terrible. Instead of us solving the problems and making it worse, or getting to the point where we love one another, where we need one another, except in the time of catastrophes, we wind up fighting each other over that catastrophe. That little piece of grassland over there with a little creek running beside it belongs to that state. No, it belongs to us. And then the next thing you know, we've got an all-out battle over that little creek with that little bit of water in it. But there's enough water in that creek so we can both use it. So why don't we both use the water out of that creek? We both can solve our thirst. We both can take part in what God has given us. And that's why he gave us this creek. Do you know of any man that makes creeks? No, you don't. Because even if we made the creek, we'd turn around and we'd spoil it. So in order to get things on one accord, the word I believe is called LOV. You got to love one another. You got to come together. You got to unify. And that's the way things solve themselves. You got a problem when you sit down and you talk one to the other about what this problem is. How do we solve this problem? Two minds has always been better than one idiot.
I think that's where we end. I think that's a perfect line.
Okay, thank you.